We now return to our regularly scheduled programming after that brief message last Friday about the changing and frankly unreasonable situation here on YouTube. And if you haven't watched that video yet, please do so. Although Dr. Sean Baker has made his own version, and, well, you can go watch the Dr. Eric Berg one yourself first. I think it's the important thing for everybody to pay attention to. So go watch somebody's take on it if you don't want to watch mine. But today we're going to talk about a potentially good move out of the state of California and its state legislature. And I have a hard time believing I'm saying that because I fully understand why so many people have left the state of California in the last couple of years. But once in a while, they do get things right. And here they are on the verge of banning some of the most dangerous food additives out there. Ultra-processed foods, regardless of whatever diet you think is the proper one to achieve optimum human health, there should be, across the board, agreement that ultra-processed food consumption is a terrible idea. The advocates for plant-based lifestyles, though, will say that ultra-processed foods are bad, while then suggesting we eat ultra-processed meat alternatives. So, it is what it is, but here in the United States, the state of California is on the verge of actually doing something right for once. So, we get this headline from them, from NBC News. California legislature passes first bill in the U.S. to ban food additives, including red dye number 3. If the governor signs into law, the measure would prohibit 4 chemicals in food and drinks that have been linked to health issues. Good news, I think. Now, we'll see, because state legislatures are at least as prone to the influence of big food and other lobbying organizations as the United States government is, Congress, you're a member of the House and the Senate is. But there are some implications to this, and I'll talk about here in a second which ones these are, because these are actually some of the most notorious food additives out there. There's one basic implication that matters in this food discussion here, and that implication is the role California plays in the American economy. More than 10% of the U.S. population at present lives in California, and while California's population looks like it's on the decline for the first time in at least a generation, they still have an enormous impact on the American economy. The best example I can give you of the role they play in all of this is not related to food so much, but it has to do with pollution. Everyone's heard of California's emission standards, or CAFE standards. The state of California has, for whatever reason, gotten away with what looks to me like a violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution prohibits state governments from making their own laws that affect interstate commerce, leaving that as the sole province of the U.S. government, right? The CAFE standards limit or set limits to the amount of particular pollutants that can come from motor vehicles, from internal combustion engines. And that's been the case for decades. And the impact of that has been that essentially Detroit and the international automakers in general make their cars for the American market based around California emission standards, because so many cars are sold in California that they have no choice to do it. And this has implications, by the way, for California's pie in the sky terrible idea that they want to do for replacing CAFE standards by the end of the decade by banning the internal combustion engine altogether and forcing everybody to go electric or ride share in California. There's no way they'll be able to implement that, not without a massive legal fight. But you see the implications here for this food diet fight. They're going to attempt to, here, if the governor signs the bill, as we'll see in a moment, ban 4 of the worst artificial food additives on the market that are legal in the U.S. but illegal in most other places. And what will end up happening is the PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, the other big processed food companies may have to just take it as a de facto banning of those ingredients, which is why I expect this is going to end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. And maybe this is going to be overturned under the Interstate Commerce Clause, as you'll see here in a second. But here, let's take a look at what the 4 nasty ingredients are. From the article, quote, if Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, signs it, Assembly Bill 418 would prohibit the sale of food and drink in California that contains red dye number 3, potassium bromate, brominated vegetable oil, and propylparaben starting in 2027. If it is enacted, it will mark the first time that a state has banned food additives that are permitted by the Food and Drug Administration. The 4 chemicals are already illegal in the European Union and many other places in the world, but they can be found in products sold in the U.S., such as brands of orange soda, icing, hamburger rolls, candies, and processed foods. End quote. So we're seeing here is, I'll give you an example. They said sodas for brominated vegetable oil. That's one I'm most familiar with. It's banned in the European Union, but found in Mountain Dew, one of the most popular soft drink brands available. And Mountain Dew is sold in the European Union. It just doesn't have that ingredient in it, which begs the question, why do they put it in the one that's sold in the United States? I couldn't tell you the answer to that question, and I'm not even sure what it means to brominate vegetable oil, but those are several words in one place that I, as a carnivore, don't want to even be ingesting. I would not be sad if these things got banned. Ultra-processed foods are one of the main drivers of poor health in the United States and the Western world today. And these kind of ingredients have no place in a even improper human diet, let alone as a proper human diet. This stuff shouldn't be legal, at least in my estimation. But here's the problem. Again, I don't expect these to stand up under scrutiny. The most powerful companies in the country, after the ones who sell you your medicine, are the food companies, especially the ultra-processed companies. I mean, think about it this way. PepsiCo could probably buy the Ford Motor Company if it wanted to. They'd probably have to leverage a lot of their assets to do it, but they could probably pull it off. They wouldn't want to, but they could do it. PepsiCo stands to lose big on this. Red dye number 3, I mean, that's going to be in several of their beverages and probably in a lot of the stuff that PepsiCo sells at Taco Bell and other places like that. So and those are just 2 of the 4. But still, I do think this is a good move because the governments need to push back. If they're going to have any pretense of regulating food for human health, this is where they should be doing it, eliminating the nasty stuff in the processed foods. Maybe, though, I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree with me. Do you think government has no place in this whatsoever? Or this is the kind of place where government should be spending its time instead of on other silly things it does? I'm curious what you think. Do you think this is going to stand up in the courts? I mean, 2027 is 3 years from now, basically. And do you expect, like I do, that between now and then you're going to see PepsiCo take the state of California to court? It's going to take them to the federal courts and go after them under the Interstate Commerce Clause? Again, the Interstate Commerce Clause says it's only the U.S. government that can regulate matters of interstate commerce. You might be wondering why the CAFE standards weren't challenged in the courts by the car companies, probably for lack of resources, and maybe they thought the U.S. government and the U.S. courts would be sympathetic given the pollution problems in California. I don't know, but I do expect to see this get challenged if the governor signs it in the federal courts, probably starting immediately, more or less. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you think I'm wrong on this. Or maybe you think this isn't a good bill at all and that people should be totally free to ingest whatever nasty chemicals they want. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. And just sharing this on social media, that helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.